Welcome to the Immigrant's Path, showcasing the successes, challenges, and the many paths to America. Brought to you by Sarraf Gentile LLP, a New York-based law firm representing individuals nationwide on immigration and other complex litigation matters.
Hi everybody. So in this episode I interviewed Sachi Dely. She is a very talented young artist from North Carolina. She is from an indigenous tribe in Vietnam, came to the U.S. as a refugee when she was a child. Her work is awesome. I really suggest that you check it out on her website, you check out her Instagram account, and if you like it, please buy. It's really important to support artists like her. Her work is really evocative, it's beautiful, and it really shows this just beautiful bridge between two different cultures seen through somebody's eyes, and I can't say enough about it. So hope you guys enjoyed the interview as much as I did. Thanks. Okay, hi everybody. Today's guest is Sachi Dely. Sachi is an indigenous Asian American artist based in Greensboro, North Carolina. She immigrated to the U.S. as a refugee in 2002. We're really excited to have her here today. So thank you and welcome.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Sure. So can you tell us a bit about your background as to where you're originally from?
Mm-hmm. So I was born in Duc Minh province, which is in southern Vietnam, about 5 hours south of Saigon, also known as Ho Chi Minh City. I was only there for like a year and a half. So I was born there, but I didn't stay there for very long. And then we had something happen and I ended up in Cambodia. So.
And you're a descendant from an indigenous group within Vietnam and Cambodia. What group is that?
So within Southeast Asia, but mainly in Vietnam, there are over 30 indigenous groups. My tribe is called the Banong tribe, but people tend to categorize them under one name, also known as Montagnard. It's not really known in Vietnam that much, but in the US, because there are different tribes here, they're kind of categorized under that one name. And Montagnard actually translates to mountain people in French. Yeah. So that's where that term actually originated from. But I'm Banong, that's my tribe, but I also say Montagnard too.
So Banong is a tribe within the larger group of what would be considered Montagnard, which is a larger group of indigenous people from a mountain region that straddles Cambodia and Vietnam. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So I know that people from those groups have come to the U.S. as refugees, and a lot of times refugee status is hinged on persecution. What are some of the, what are some of the persecutions that are happening to these groups in Asia?
Yeah, so in Vietnam particularly, it's religious persecution, and that's what it is mainly, but there's also a lot of land conflict as well. And yeah, that's really what it is mostly, at least for the Montagnard people. A lot of the refugees came because of land conflict, but the first group came because of the Vietnam War, because the history behind the Montagnard people in the Vietnam War is that we were actually allies with the American side. So when the Americans left, the government went after the people who fought for the American side. So they left after that because they were technically war criminals. So yeah, so it's a lot of different things. It really depends on which group.
That sounds like a familiar story, unfortunately, today. It sounds like a lot of what's happening in Afghanistan now.
Yeah.
So the groups are, I assume the land conflict has to do with, are the tribes mostly in forests? Like in forested areas?
They're in the mountain region. So Vietnam belongs to the indigenous people. And it's a long history, but the Vietnamese people who occupy Vietnam right now were originally from China. This is like years, hundreds of years ago, but they are originally from China, and they were Chinese peasants from the south who went down to Vietnam to occupy more lands. Can't remember all of the historical facts, but so as they were coming down, more of the indigenous people started being pushed up the mountains, and more land was taken away. And then when the French came to Vietnam in like the late 1800s, and they were trying to colonize the country, that was when they had the war with the French. And the French basically came to the Montagnard people and asked for their help to fight in the war for exchange, that they get their land back. Well, the French lost. And then through, so I can't remember exactly which document, but we lost our land officially after the French lost the war with Vietnam. So then all our land went to the Vietnamese people. So now the Vietnamese government has control of the land, so they can just take land whenever they want, basically.
I really wasn't familiar with that history, so that's good to learn. I know you were in a refugee camp when you were very, very young. Do you have any memories of that at all?
You know, weirdly, I don't have any memories of like the refugee camp, but I do have memories of like the journey there. And what I do remember is like being in the forest, and my mom had me on her back, like straddled on her back. And I remember falling off of a hammock because when we were in the jungle, we were sleeping on hammocks. And I remember falling off a hammock and having a leech like on my forehead and screaming. So yeah. Memories.
Yeah, that's the type of thing that sticks out in childhood.
Yeah, but I don't really remember the refugee camp too much. I remember like little things here and there. Like I have like a good memory of like soy milk, because that's what they gave the refugees there. Like food was very limited, so when we did get stuff, you know, it went away very fast because it was like a big group. But I remember they gave us soy milk a lot. So, and even now when I go to like the store, I get soy milk, and I don't know, it's comforting. But yeah, and stuff like that. You know, but I was really young, so I don't really remember.
Oddly, I drink soy milk. I drink soy milk a lot too, and I think it's for the same reason. I've been lactose intolerant for my entire life, so even as an infant, I had soy milk. I didn't have regular milk because I can't digest it. So I guess I probably have the same connection to childhood with soy milk. But did you move directly to North Carolina from Cambodia? And
sorry, what was that?
No, go ahead. Please.
No, continue. I was just saying that we went straight from Cambodia to Greensboro, North Carolina, and that's where I am right now.
And it seems like a lot of times when refugees come to the U.S. in large groups, a lot of times they congregate in particular areas. Is Greensboro like a hub for Montagnard people in the U.S.?
Yeah, it is now. So the first group of refugees that came in '86 came to North Carolina, and the story behind that is that actually the Green Berets that fought in the Vietnam War, they're mostly from North Carolina, and you know, they fought with the Montagnards. So when they came, they were like, "Oh, bring them to North Carolina." And because originally they wanted to send us to California, where there was a large Vietnamese population. But the Green Berets, you know, vouched and encouraged them to send us to North Carolina, because they said that the mountain landscape will, I guess, remind us of home, even though it's completely different. But yeah, so that's one reason why we came to North Carolina. So it started with the first group in '86, and then more people just came to North Carolina. So now there's like a huge population here.
Oh, that's interesting. It's such an interesting thing in the U.S. that, if you kind of have stereotypes of certain regions of the country and what you think it would be like, this is not something you would expect to hear from, a relatively small city in North Carolina. And there's examples like this all over the country where these refugee communities in parts of the countries and states that you wouldn't necessarily connect to having large immigrant populations if you're not from there. So it's really surprising. Have you been interested in art your whole life?
You said what?
Have you been interested in
art? Been in North Carolina?
No. Have you been interested in art your whole life?
Yes, I would say yes, I have. Like since I was very, very young. Honestly, it was very much like a coping mechanism in my childhood. I don't know. I like to get lost in what I was creating. I remember like the first memory of like me wanting to be an artist was like when I was like in, I think first or second grade, and I had like a teacher's assistant who was actually in school to be an art teacher. She did all art projects with us, and I created this drawing one time, and she really liked it. And she was like, "Can I take this to show my, to my college class?" I was like, "Yeah, absolutely." She's like, "Because this is amazing." And I was like, "Yeah, I like this." And I never got it back, so I don't know whatever happened.
I guess they liked it.
Yeah, I know, right?
So has Montagnard or Bunang art been something that's like always been a part of your life even when you were little, or is it something that you had to deliberately turn to when you got older?
So I turned to it when I got older. I studied art at Guilford College, and I was studying a lot of old historical art, and I was just like, I can't relate to this art. I don't see people like me. I want to create something for like if like younger me or like the next generation of like Montagnard children who can see art that they can relate to. So yeah, it was definitely something I turned to when I was older. It was kind of like, I think I remember sitting in my mixed media class and we were like thinking about projects to do, and I was just like, what do I want to see? And I was like, okay, I want to see something about me related into this and my culture. So that was when I had my epiphany, basically.
Well, how did you go about learning about Montagnard art? Like, as I was kind of researching this interview, I tried to kind of familiarize myself a bit with some of the traditional art. And it's not easy to find a whole bunch of examples for it. So how did you go about educating yourself on it?
So as far as Montagnard art goes, it's mainly like basket weaving and then like fabric weaving and then like storytelling. So there wasn't any like paintings, not really even any sculptures. When it came to like Montagnard art that I was aware of. So I did intern at a place for 3 years in college called the Montagnard Association. It's a nonprofit that helps immigrants and refugees who've been in the US for less than 5 years. But we also do other stuff like cultural preservation and social work. And through that, I actually met older Montagnard elders who did art. So they would play music and then they weave fabric and like, so I just incorporated what I learned and just put it on a canvas, but with my own personal touch to it, because all my paintings that I have like they're personal to me in some ways. I very much think my paintings are like a reflection of whatever phase I was going through at that time, so it really captures that moment. So like the painting behind me, I was very confused about my culture. That's why my head is not attached to my body. But yeah.
I originally came across you not through your paintings, but through Letter to a Refugee. which was a short video that I saw that you did online, which I found to be very well done and very moving. I really like that. And, that's really what spurred me to contact you. I did also have a chance to look through a lot of your paintings, and I really like them. I think they're great.
Thank you.
I get out of them what I get out of them, but what is it that, and I guess you kind of answered this a bit, but what is it you'd like to communicate with your art overall?
Well, I want to put my culture on the map. I want them to be recognized. They went through a lot during the war and after the war too, and they're still going through a lot right now. It's very hard to be, especially in the US, when you're like a minority within a minority. So one thing I want to do is, bring some recognition to my tribe, to my people, let their story be known, because there's so much more to like. One thing is that when I was growing up in the US, I didn't really know much about my culture, but I was learning about the Vietnam War. And one thing I never learned about the Vietnam War was what role my tribe or what the Montagnard people had in the war. It was never mentioned, but we played a really big role that helped the US very much. And we didn't get any recognitions in the history books. So that's one thing that pushed me to make art as well, is to put our story out there. And like I said, for, I guess, not even just younger Montagnard kids, but just any child that feels like their culture isn't represented, that they can be the one to represent that culture, or, to put it out there, basically. And through my art, I also, like any artist, I want to, I don't know, just show my emotions on the canvas. It's a lot of things, really, but I think that what I just mentioned was what it is mainly.
And in addition to showing your emotions, does it help you kind of figure it out? Is it just kind of a, some people describe journaling in that way. They're kind of talking to themselves in some way. When you kind of write it out and put it in a different format, you're educating yourself kind of as to who you are. I mean, does art play that role for you as well?
Yeah, I feel like I am someone who I have a lot of emotions, and I don't exactly know how to express myself in the best way. But for some reason, when I put it in images on a canvas, like, it doesn't have to make sense to anybody else, as long as it makes sense to me. So that's, yeah, it very much is me. Just, it's for me. I mean, but I share it with everyone else. Yeah.
I just laughed a little. Not that I thought that your answer was funny, but it's just that looking at your art, it's very expressive. And if you have a problem expressing yourself, I don't know what it says for the rest of us muggles who can't, or not artistic and can't paint. You're so much further ahead of the curve in self-expression than we are. So I kind of feel bad.
I've been getting better. I've been getting better at that. So yeah, because when I was making this piece, it was like I had a hard time communicating how I felt, or like putting out into words. And sometimes, just putting it in images just helped me.
Well, I mean, just my own 2 cents. I heard you mention in another interview that you did about, it kind of struck you that during the whole description of the Vietnam War as it's taught in US schools, or at least the school you went to, and certainly the schools I went to, the perspective of the Montagnard people is just completely missing. It's not there. It's like they don't exist. And I think your art does a better job on educating with regards to that than a line in a textbook would. So not to downplay the importance of just kind of learning the facts and learning the story in that respect, it is important. But art, it has such an ability to humanize something. So I could read a line on a page about what happened to a group of people and how a war affected them. But when you see art produced by somebody in the group and it humanizes the group in a way that makes them more familiar, you see a more of a human connection to it. It just makes the facts so much more alive and relevant. So I guess you do need the facts, but the art provides the human context to it that otherwise would be missing. So I don't know if that's an intention of what you're doing, but just as one person who's consumed some of your art, that's part of the effect it has, at least on me. And I'm sure I'm not the only person that views it that way.
No, that's something I do want, like people who view my art to I want them to feel something. And one thing I learned when I was in school was that good art is art that people can stare at and feel something, not just something they look at and move on. So yeah, that is my intention, is I want someone to feel something, it doesn't have to be what I'm feeling, but as long as it moves you in some type of way or makes you think or like wonder what I was thinking, then I feel like I achieved what I wanted to.
Yeah, I mean, you familiarize the unfamiliar. So what I guess what I mean by that is I have no real knowledge prior to interviewing you of the tribe that you're from or the Montagnard groups overall. But by seeing what you do, I see the common human connection in a way that is, if I'm dealing with a group of people that I have no familiarity with, it's good to have that, just that immediate reminder that you're dealing, and it should be obvious, but you're dealing with human people who have a very similar range of emotion that you have, and are kind of go through a lot of the same things you have, even though it's a different cultural context. So it's just such a good bridge for different cultures. So
thank you.
Yeah. All right. Do you have any pieces of work that you've done art-wise that you're particularly proud of?
So I did do these 2 pieces recently that reflected on my experience at the refugee camp. I presented it at it was just a small little exhibition that we did through a grant for Creative Greensboro. And the event was called Past is Present Multi-Art Artist Event. And we did like writing workshops and then an art exhibition featuring me and then another multi-art artist who was also Benong as well. But what I did was I basically asked a bunch of people who were refugees if they had any pictures from the refugee camps, because I didn't have any pictures except for maybe like 3. But I mean, I knew other people did. So I started this Facebook group where I was like, if you're okay with, posting your pictures, can I, get some inspiration from them or something? And I had a good amount of people. Well, I invited a lot of people, but only maybe like 10 posted. But one particular person gave me a good amount of pictures, and they were pictures that I actually had flashbacks looking at. And they were pictures of children playing with this rubber band jump rope. And it's a game that they played at the refugee camp because the kids didn't really have like toys or anything like that. So it's this image of them playing with this jump rope, and how they play is that it's basically like limbo, but the opposite. You got to jump above and it gets higher, and then you have to do these like tricks with your feet. So I saw that image and I was like, this brings me back memories. And ironically, the image that I saw, my cousins were in it. They are also refugees too, and it was them when they were like younger. They were like 5. So I painted that, but I don't copy the image exactly. I kind of put my own twist to it. And one thing I did was, because I do remember it a little bit. So one thing, they were jumping. The picture is them playing the game on like a hard concrete floor, and I remember the floor being so cold, and I just try to capture that. But then I also try to put the movement in it and tried to I don't know, it was just like the background I had in the painting is very dark, but where the children was, I had it bright because, the thing about kids that's nice, is that they can make like even like the most depressing spaces kind of pretty happy for the moment because they're enjoying, playing the game. So that's something I remember is that when you're with a group of other kids and you're playing, it's like you kind of forget that, oh, you're in a refugee camp and everyone's struggling to like eat right now. So that was something that I painted. And then I did another one of this photo where right before we came to the US, so in Cambodia, they moved us to 2 refugee camps. There was one refugee camp that was near the border of Vietnam and Cambodia. That area got a bit too dangerous, so they moved us a little bit more to the center of Cambodia. And then before we went to the US, they moved us to like this, I just remember like an big empty warehouse with like tiles. It kind of looked like a mall, the way I'm imagining it, but it was just like a 1-floor warehouse with some really nice tiles. And they had all the refugees in there, just, and they had like set up beds and camps and like clothing lines in there. And I painted that again. And it was just, I just remember the tiles just being very vibrant to me. So I really try to capture that in the tiles. And also one thing I remember too is that even in the picture you see is that there's so much space in the warehouse, but people still chose to be close to each other, And I think that represents very much the indigenous, the tribe mentality is like to be close to each other. And that's also one reason why they sent a lot of Montagnards to North Carolinas, so that there can be a community here.
Have you been
So those are my 2 most.
Have you been back to Vietnam as an adult?
Yes, I actually went in 2020, right before the world shut down.
Wow, good timing.
Yeah, and so I went January of 2020 for like a month and a week or so with my mom and my 2 siblings, my younger sister and brother. And yeah, it was fun, I would say.
How did that match your expectations? I mean, it's probably a lot of expectations going back to the country of your birth. You've been separated for so long. So did it meet the expectations of what you had in your head, what it would be like there?
I always say to myself, don't have expectations or else you're gonna like disappoint yourself. So I didn't have any expectations, but at the same time, I was expecting to feel, I don't know, something when I was there. And I did feel something, it was great to be reunited with my family and like my grandparents. But honestly, I don't know what I thought I was gonna feel, but it just felt normal, it just felt like I was traveling back to Vietnam. And the thing about Vietnam is that I was only there for like a year and a couple months when I was a baby. And even then I was a baby. I don't have any memory of Vietnam. So even though Vietnam is home, when I went back, it wasn't the country that felt like home. It was my family, my grandparents, and finally seeing them because, growing up, like I'd visit my friends and they're like, oh, I'm going to my grandparents' house or I'm hanging out with my grandparents or whatever. I was like, oh, I don't have grandparents in the US, so it was like, it was nice to go back and be spoiled by my grandparents. So I felt like there was that made me feel, it made me feel really good, And also my parents, they don't have any immediate family in the US. So except for my dad who has a sister. So it was for the first time, it was really like being with my family, finally meeting the people that I've been talking to on like FaceTime screens. So that was really it, really reuniting with my family. That was great. But being in the country itself kind of made me like sad, I guess, because especially like, because like the villages where we're at, you see a lot of like poor families And, you know, I mean, that's what happened when you go to a country where, you know, it's I guess it's still developing, I would say. But it was just like I kind of just I was, because I know the history of the war and my people too, I was just kind of feeling, I was just thinking about what had happened there, you know, in the highlands, you know, all the tragic murders that happened, and the rape and the torture and the war and the fighting. And it's very much, even though that happened a long time ago, it's, you know, you could see how it still affects people to this day. The indigenous people, you know, how there's, I feel like, separated from the rest of society in some ways, not separated, but like I don't know, it was just it could be, it was a little bit sad, kind of, yeah.
Did you have a chance to learn more about the art in the region while you were there? Or is that something you had time to focus on?
So I didn't get to like I was really trying to like meet other artists there, but when I went there, there aren't really people who classify themselves as artists. And I was even looking for like people who were like who did basket weavings, or like who, you know, um made clothes and stuff like that. But I didn't really get to meet anyone like that. Um so no, not really. I wasn't in the city, so there wasn't really like an art museum or art gallery around where I was at. It was like a town. It wasn't like too country where I was at. There was still like a town with like stores and stuff like that. But I didn't see any art galleries or anything like that.
So how would you describe, I guess, some of the differences between the culture from over there with the Montagnard groups and U.S. culture, or at least U.S. culture as you see it through the lens of somebody in North Carolina?
When you say, are you saying like the difference between Montagnard culture in Vietnam versus Montagnard culture in the
No,
US?
no,
Or
just general U.S. culture. Or if you want to answer it that way, that's fine too. I mean, that would be interesting to see how the experience of living in the US for some people, I guess, for a few decades, how it's changed them culturally, or if it has at all.
well, I could start with your first question.
Yeah.
Well, definitely like in the US, it's I would say the food is very different, especially when I went to Vietnam. There's a lot more fresh, and the portions were smaller, and very not very many like I guess fast food places unless you're in the city. But the stores are different, mostly like flea markets. That was like the grocery store, so that's where we went to get all our groceries and stuff like that. Um, in general, I feel like the US has a very individualistic like viewpoint where, you know, people are very, I guess they're for themselves, or they're separated, or like I said, a very individualistic mindset, where in Vietnam I felt like there was more a sense of community, like people knew the neighbors, and you know, it was just, I don't know, I just felt, maybe because I was back home with my family, I felt more of a sense of community. Um, but also I feel like in Vietnam, where I was in the country, it was more laid back. It felt like time went by slower. People were farmers, but people didn't have much, but they seemed relatively happy, you know? Whereas the US, it's like, I feel like money very much determines how happy you can be from time to time. You know, basic stuff to survive. Let me see what else. I think that's all I can really think of right now. I mean, the US and Vietnam is very different for sure. The US, I like that we have a lot of freedom. But sometimes I feel like people take advantage of that freedom, or they don't know what to do with it, that they act out. Whereas in Vietnam, there isn't, not saying that there isn't freedom, but I would definitely say that, you know, Vietnam has their own government issues, just like every other country, I suppose. So, yeah.
Yeah, you could see that the excesses of American freedom if you spend about 15 minutes on social media. It doesn't take long to see that.
Yeah.
The issue of accepting refugees in the U.S. and how many refugees to take, it's something that in the last, number of years has become politically charged. There are some groups in the U.S. that are basically in favor of having no refugees or very, very few. And other groups want the U.S. to play a more traditional role like it's always played, welcoming large numbers of refugees. So I don't know if you've paid attention to that debate or it's something that you're aware of, but if it is something that you pay attention to, what's missing in the discussion from your perspective as somebody that came here as a refugee? Like when you look at that debate, what is it that you feel that's missing that you just wish would get communicated more effectively?
Well, I know about it, but I wouldn't say I know that much. But at least from my own perspective is that I just feel like refugees are misunderstood. And people think that there's like one type of refugee when I believe there are three types of refugees. One that gets out of that has to leave because of war, one that is kicked out of their country, and then the third one, I can't remember what it is, but I feel like people think that refugees get to choose where they go, and the thing is they don't. They're just looking for anywhere to go that is safe, and sometimes they don't want to leave their home country, but they have to, and I feel like that's also misunderstood as well. Like and a lot of the times refugees are people who have to leave not because of what they did, but because of what their government did or the higher ups did, so they have no choice. So it's like I always say welcome refugees, because not only am I one, but it's like we don't know their story or their backgrounds, and if they had the choice to stay in their country, or like I feel like if they had the choice, they wouldn't be refugees, if that makes sense, so yeah, that's at least that's my view. It's just I
Well,
think
in your experience, you've lived around a lot of refugees. How do you think they improve or impact the life of the other people in the community that are not refugees? So the non-refugee American community, how do they benefit from welcoming refugees?
Well, I think that refugees, because they a lot of times come from like countries that they don't get a lot of I guess opportunity to do certain things. For example, like in one interview I talked about how if I probably stayed in Vietnam, or I might have not became an artist, so I wouldn't be able to share my culture, my art to other people who aren't refugees to understand my story, or to understand my culture. So it's things like that that refugees can bring to the US. It's like they can share their culture, but they can also, refugees, because they come to the US, they can be anything they want to be. So they can be your doctor, they could be your lawyer, they could be your teacher, they could be your friend, they can offer so many things to you. They're just humans. We're all just humans, so yeah, I think that's it.
Yeah, in my experience, I've had a lot of conversations with refugees just through my professional life. And I don't know if it's anecdotal, but it seems to me that more so even than other immigrants, refugees come here with a really strong sense of ambition and wanting to take advantage of everything that can be taken advantage of here in a positive way. They're really looking to contribute and to accomplish. So I don't get the sense refugees come here and take a lot for granted in terms of the
Sorry, let me turn
opportunities.
this AC off real quick. So
Yeah, sure.
okay. Sorry.
Yeah, so there's that, and I also think that there's a lot of different facets to the human experience, right? And we all have kind of a unique piece of that puzzle as to what the human experience looks like. And refugees, particularly from parts of the world where there's not a lot of people in the US from those parts of the world, it brings a really unique perspective. And it's just a unique piece of the puzzle to contribute here to this messy melting pot of a country that we have. If you look at, it's not necessarily through refugees, but through immigration. If you look at the food in this country alone, what people here eat, you could see how much it's influenced by immigrants. It would just be a completely different place without it. And, if you look at what Americans eat, by and large, they eat Italian food, they eat Chinese food, and they eat Mexican food. I mean, by and large, those are probably the three biggest groups of foods that they eat, and it's all through immigrants and immigration. So to the extent that we get to add another piece of that puzzle of the world culture here, I think it's such a valuable thing for everybody else here. It's so great. So for people that are interested in viewing your art and potentially purchasing it, where can they go to view it and potentially buy it?
So right now I do have a residency coming up the beginning of next year. That's going to be at the Cultural Center in downtown Greensboro, I believe. Yeah. But as far as like purchasing it, they can connect to me on my Instagram and just DM me. I have a website, but I need to update it. I don't even have any of my newer pieces on there. I have it mostly on my Instagram. So, and my Instagram is art_by_Sachi. That's SACHI. So yeah, it's best to contact me through Instagram, or you can email me because my email is also, it's on my website. So that'll work too.
Well, what's your website?
It's jartstudios.com. So that's CHIARTSTUDIO.com, or Art Studios with the S at the end.
Okay. All right. That's great.
Yeah.
All right. So before we go, is there anything we didn't touch on in this discussion you'd like to bring up or share?
Not particularly. Is there anything else you want to ask me?
No, I think I went through everything I wanted to go through in this conversation. So thank you for being so open and candid in the discussion. I think people are really going to get a lot out of this. So I really appreciate you taking the time to do this.
Thank you for having me.